Helge of InCoax. He's been doing this integration of MoCA in buildings for a long time. We're going to hear from him of actual use case. Let's hear about this use case, Helge.
Yesterday morning touched down on this homes past and homes connected theme. I mean, in the homes, the past is very much that the fiber is rather away from, but yesterday I learned that homes connected in the MDU case means that the fiber is in the basement, but it's not connecting the customers. And of course, this is a very hot topic today. I mean, we have a financial situation where people maybe don't want to put more money in building the infrastructure behind. Now it is pushed to how to connect these apartments, what is the best way, and what will be the return on investment. And I wanted to take up one case. I mean, we are operating in US. I mean, as Paul also mentioned, there is a big push for gigabit. I mean, even up to 25 gigabit. The situation is in Europe is more like, can we get 1 gig? That would be nice. So I have taken one example, which is a small city operator who had the fiber already to all its MDUs. But what shall I use? Shall I use VDSL? Shall I use GFast? Or what? Or should I cable the building? What should be the way? And in this case, they select MoCA Access for this. And I want to go through, not technical, because they have very good technical presentation. What is really the business case? And what is the payback time on an investment on using the existing infrastructure in the rural area? And this rural area is in Finland. It's a small place where it's 5 municipal areas with 22,000 inhabitants, about 10,000 households, and then there is 3,100 leisure homes, 1,800 companies. And in this case, fiber build was started 2013. That's more than 10 years ago, 11 years ago. And the network today has reached 3,500 households. I would say this is, in US perspective, it's a very rural area. But if you go to Finland, if you say that it's rural, they maybe don't like that in that place. And the length of the fiber built is 1,300 kilometers. And in this case, the operator, which is partly owned by the municipal, the council, is 50% owned by them and 50% by private interest. There was the municipal tenant owner. This is old Kankaanpään asuntohankinta Oy. Don't try to repeat that. It is, in some cases, you can call it social living. I mean, usually in the Nordics and in Europe, we have social living. That means it's a rental apartments for people who don't have money to buy their own. But in some cases, they can be very nice looking. So this case was 540 apartments. In reality, it was 545, but then there was some which was not decided to be in the project. And they did have, I mean, in Finland, we have in almost every small location you had before an own telephone company. And to get the phone line in the early days, you have to buy a share, and then you got the phone. And then sometime in 1980s, these telephone companies became also cable providers. So they started to build a cable network which to provide TV services. And then these TV services was then acquired by larger, in this case it was the Finnish DNA who owned the network in this and provided services. So they had a TV package from about 13 euro, and then they had asymmetrical DOCSIS 3-band services from 200-50 megahertz up to 1 gig-100 meg, and the pricing was around 35 to 49 or 50 euro. And then, because there is projects going on within EU, and Kankaanpään, they even were finalists in a project where they can produce local TV to create the community feeling. So they were one of the finalists in this project. So there was a big drive to get type of local channels into this, that people can feel more that I'm a part of this community. So there was a number of reasons why the municipal building owner wanted to change provider. So local TV programs was one, and of course a more competitive broadband pricing important, because I mean this is type social living. You can't take the prices like in US. I mean in US you have 1 gig service for $70 per month. I mean that's not happening in Europe. And also those users who are gaming a lot, they want to have symmetrical services. I mean that's becoming the youngsters, and of course the youngsters are the driver in many families that you need the broadband connection. And also, I mean, as we know, broadband is not an easy thing. I mean, many of us have been sitting in the support queue to the main broadband operators, and why don't they answer? It's like if I try to rebook my Lufthansa ticket, you have position 661. So, I mean, local support becomes more and more important. And maybe that also comes a better customer care. So in this case, PSSV offered a TV package from €6 with less TV channels. I mean, in the market today, if you have bought a Samsung TV, you get, hundreds of TV channels. So why do I need the way in earlier hundreds of TV channels? I need the basic channels which are needed to be there. And in many European countries, you have also the requirement that there has to be the must-carrier channels because of possibility for war. And we have also the case in some countries, we have the demand that you have to have the radio also over the cable network. So that means 88 to 107 megahertz is reserved for radio, and then you have the TV. TV is, of course, you can place in other places, but typically the radio distribution is not converted to any other frequency range. And they decided that they would like to have a pricing on 100, 200, 500, and 1 gig symmetrical services from 25 euro per month. That was 10 euro cheaper than the cable operator was possible to offer. And this was not an agreement with the building owner, it was individual agreements. And the time was 24 months binding time. So it is a combination. This is a map of the location. There is a combination of MDUs, multi-dwelling units, and terrace house units. And they were spread around the whole area. And these were already fibered. They had fiber connections in several years. But they didn't know, how do I connect these buildings in an efficient way? We have to remember that it's not everyone buying the broadband. It's very few who want to have the broadband, because these are partially social living. And in Finland, we have a very good network on mobile services. So they have a mobile service. You have to compete with that. So the decision was to set up from a central office a point-to-point Ethernet connection with the fiber. And it is, they put in the additional service switch with 25 ports. This was about 20 buildings. And start with 1 gig service, not more. And you have a dedicated service VLAN per building. So that was the way they wanted to separate the customers. And the management VLAN, which is available to all of the buildings. And this is connected to a service provider's BNG, which provides IP addresses. So the service switch provides only 1 gig. So I mean, we speak about multi-gig in US, as I all mentioned, 20 gig, 25 gig. Here it is to get in the rural area, a gig connection. That's fantastic. So, and these buildings, they were typically done, and this is how the coax network was built. It was typically built in 1970s, 80s. They had a central antenna. So that means that the coax networks was initiated from the roof, but the cable provider had added the cable from the basement up to the splitter, which divides to the different branches. And in this case, it is the connection goes from an antenna outlet to next antenna outlet and to next antenna outlet. And in this case, we added, there was fiber in a fiber termination box, and the decision was to use one fiber for TV services and one fiber for data services. And then there was installed a new TV amplifier, because the DNO amplifiers which were there before, they were removed, and the PSSV put their own TV amplifiers and decided to use 146 to 234 megahertz for TV services, and then 400 to 900 megahertz for MoCA services. And DNO, who was the earlier provider, they had upgraded the network for 1218. That means DOCSIS 3.1 services. So The network was there. This was only to change and then start to reuse that. And the operators started to sell services, and they started last autumn, and they got 13% of the subscribers interested. So the question was, will this be a business case? I mean, 13% is very low. What we hear in other markets is you come up to 25, 30% before you start. If you have an area where you have private homes, you are digging fiber, you maybe need up to 40, 50%. Otherwise, it's not worthwhile because you don't get the business case. But in this case, it was required that 13% is the take-up rate, and that will then hopefully increase. And the whole business case was based on that 13% has to have a reasonable payback on this investment. So the services which were set up, it was a 100 meg service, and we configured the MoCA to around 125. In reality, we got somewhere between 120 and 125 megabit up and down. So there was a priority for that everyone will have a minimum capacity, and then there was a top capacity. And the top capacity was set to 125, 225, 550, and 1.1 gig. So in the reality, when customers who got the 1 gig service, they measured 940 symmetrical speed. And in the 100 meg case, they got about 120. And guess how happy they were? Oh, I have paid for 100 meg, I get 20% more. Wow! And the TV services was 146 to 235, and that could carry up to 40 TV channels. And that was good enough because they investigated how many people are looking on these channels. I mean, there is 5, 6, 7 channels people look on, and the rest is they even don't know that they are there. And in those cases, if you have sport-interested people, you must be able to provide IPTV. In this case, it was Allcom who was a provider of IPTV services, and people could then add an IPTV service, and that was an additional option. And then, of course, as Pierre mentioned, management is everything. In this case, we put in an InCoax element management system, which communicates with the DPUs in the buildings, and it has a northbound integration XML SOAP platform. This has not yet been integrated. Still, they're using this element manager for these services. But the plan is to integrate that to a higher provision platform. And how does it look then? Yeah, it looks like this. It is typically, in Finland, there is in the buildings a typically telco room, which is also a cable TV room. There is the phone switch MDF part. Then there is the blue box, which is the new TV amplifier. And then there is the black box, which is the InCoax controller, which is connected to the fiber. So this was, depending on the building size, if it was a smaller building, then it was a single port DPU with a capacity of, 3.2 gig over the coax link, and you could have about, let's say, up to 20 customers. And if it's about a larger building, then we had a 4-port version. And then this was combined with the combiners, so the TV service and the data service could run parallel. And so that was the deployment. And then, of course, one of the important things is that when you start to install this, what is the aspects you need to look on? Of course, in this case, it was very easy. It was no outdoor conditions. I mean, like up in Finland, it can be minus 30 degrees. But it can be also plus 25, 30 in the summer, so you have to have outdoor equipment, and in this case it was indoor equipment. And also that we wanted to have the installation in one place. I mean, we didn't want to have them spread out because you want to have one service point. This was done by an external installer. It took 3 hours per building, and it's a cost of 200 per location. So it was a very quick way. I mean, if they would have done a FTTH installation, we have talked about 400 euro per apartment. Or it's a huge difference in time saving. So this project started, deployment project started 4th of December last year. It was finalized 18th. And that was then we had connected all these 540 apartments. And we didn't do any apartment visits because thanks to the cable provider, they had built a good network. And we saw that we don't need to do any visits to the home. And then the modem, the NT modem, network termination modem, was installed by the customer. So the customer got a bag. In there was our modem. There was also a Wi-Fi router, which was part of this. And then they did all the installation by themselves. So to do this, of course, we had to provide a lot of training. I mean, it's all based, what is MoCA? I mean, we have got a little bit training here, and that's also the reason I'm in the BBF. I'm trying to train you as how can you reuse the coax in a very efficient way. So very much, training. Then also the provider, PSSV, did a site inspection, went through all the places, and then they made a document for the installer. This is the way it should be done. And then we had with the service provider and the PSSV an education program where we went through how do we serve this, how we set up, and how can we have a backup support channel if they need to have any help. And then also we did, in all these cases, it's always that how should we configure the service in this case, which frequency bands we have using 400 to 900. That means we can run 2 gigabits up and downstream. In this case, we selected, now we don't run we only run 3 channels as 1.5 gigs, so we can provide a gig service to everyone, and then we can increase that later. So it was about how should this be set up and what is the services, and always when you come to any network, what is the external disturbances? How well is this network built? And that is a part of the installation process, that you make a spectrum analysis and see that is there any loose connections or so on, is there something leaking in? And in this case we had a TV broadcasting mast in this location which was sending on a 550 megahertz. We had 5G base stations, we had 4G base stations. So we identified, here in this building they have to redo a little bit of the connection because there was leaking in. But that was a part of the deployment process. The most trickiest part was that there was one coax cable which was almost right made, but it wasn't, and we couldn't find it. It took several hours, and we saw, now we see what the problem, and then all the problems disappeared. So there is a process around this, but all this, I mean, the installer did it work, then the operator went through what is the performance, everyone, and then there was an action to get it in place. So then we come to the initial take-up rate. I mean, that is always the question, how many will connect to this new service? There is a combination of mobile services. So first, when we start this project, we had 13% of the subscribers. And then we started to look on the forecasting model, how many will join? And we expected that during this year, because we started this last year, so we had 13% the start point. This year we should get around 20%, and we are very close to that. So there has been a type of mouth spread that this is working well, and I get 20% more. I mean, that was very important. I get more than I pay for. So this gave us a little bit, I believe that we probably reached 20%, and maybe we can come up to close to 50% in the 5-year plan we have. And the ARPU was calculated to be 28 euro per month, compared with US, as I mentioned, 70 euro for 1 gig. I mean, it's a huge difference. So will this investment be profitable, and when will it be profitable? So then we started the CapEx calculation. We did this not for 545 apartments. It is the central unit, it's the SFP module, installation cost, the NT cost, and Wi-Fi router cost. So if you look only on the CapEx, which was for the building, I mean, established this was 60 euro per apartment. And then you look on the active customers who got the CPE, that means InCoax NTE and the Wi-Fi router, the cost was 159 euro. So based on those figures, we came to a type of ROE calculation. So first year's average revenue active data subscribers was 532 euros. And that is, of course, falling because the part of new coming customers it's not as much as we had in the beginning. So after the 5th year, we saw that it's about 349 euro. And if we have we say this is depreciation should be done in 5 years. and we have a certain OPEX level. First year we calculated that is a 40 euro, then that will be falling down to 10 euro. So the property network payback time in this case is 18 months. So that means with only 13% first year and 20% second year, we have in 18 months, we have paid back the investment. And if you would compare that with fiber deployment, that would probably come to more than 10 years before we have that. And if we turn this back, if it wouldn't be so much social living, it would be more normal conditions, we see that it's about 25%. So 9 month time, payback time is. And mainly that comes from that is the installation, reuse of the coax. It's so much more efficient than we use pulling in a new fiber or a new Cat6 cable. I mean, in Sweden, for example, we are building Cat6 cables in the buildings, and the cost of those is about 250 euro per apartment. And in this type of case, that will never be able because it is too high capex on the new installation. So what I see in US, payback times are 3-4 months in the best cases. So there is a rather big deviation. But one thing which at least I learned from this project is that by reusing the existing infrastructure, and now when the world is going more and more to IP-based services like TV also, and it's not anymore important to have this amount TV channels, you maybe can reduce that. So reusing the coax, it's a fantastic business case. Thank you.
Thank you, Helga. And before you leave, if there are any questions, come to the floor. The first one I guess I have is around the take rate. The 13%, that was the target for the ROI. I'm kind of curious why it's so low. Is it just because people don't have computers or uses, or?
No, they did start this project in August last year, and they went out and asked, are you interested in to have a better internet service, and can we change this? So the building owner went out, and from that indication they saw the number of data subscribers will not be more than 10%. Then they come back, okay, how many will we get? So they started the project, but they were forced to do this because they had already done the contract with the building owner for TV services, and they need to provide a data service. They're a bit forced to it, so they didn't get more than 13%.
Okay. Is part of that marketing though? Then and making sure you kind of help the demand.
That is their. I mean, their main focus now is to market this in a wise way, and it's in this type of small locations, mouth to mouth is the best.
Yeah.
So and we start to see now there is more MDUs in that area connecting, but it's not many MDUs. But the interest is starting, and in some way the discussion of broadband has wake up again. Okay.
Yeah, Kevin's got
broadband.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And just, Kevin Knoll with Cable Labs. Maybe a follow-up on Ken's question. Is part of the take-up rate, is it limited by the affordability of devices? Like, do the people in the homes actually have a computer or a device they can connect?
Yeah, I mean, in this case, many of the people who live in this type of buildings, they are elderly people. They even don't use a computer. Many has, phone, and they think the phone is good enough for I can handle my bank affairs and so on. So computers is not so commonly used. It's mainly in those, and they checked also how many people really have a computer, and it was not so much less than they can believe. I don't have a figure on that, but it was mainly families who had children where there was a computer. And of course, if you have a phone, you don't need a broadband connection because you have a 5G connection in that location. So, the number of computers is of course driving that, what type of device. And of course, if you have then, in this case, you have Wi-Fi service, and of course you can use Wi-Fi service over this phone. But elderly people, they don't know how to disconnect that service to the local service. Very much youngsters were driving this, and people. There were some home workers who worked from home, for architecture workers, and they wanted to have a gig service. I'm very keen on is the gig service. How much do I get? We said you get 940 about. But why can't I get 1 gig? Yeah, because the Ethernet connector in that is reducing 8% under that. And then, of course, the question comes, why don't the operator, I asked them, why can't you use a 2 gig modem? Because, I mean, in the MoCA can run 2 gig, and in the near future, we can run 5 gig service. No, but it's a little bit too expensive. It's, again, the business case. It costs a little bit more. So why should we put that for the few ones who have the gig? Because most of the customers has 100 meg service, not the gig service.
I have one more comment then. Yeah, I think you said the area that you were building this in is 20,000 residents or something like that. I live in a place where it's a third of that. And so I get to see this rural broadband problem on a daily basis. And it's interesting, the parallels that we see in the U.S. and what you just showed. And I just want to say thank you, because I think it's really important that we have broadband to everyone. And you've shown a business case that's usable to make it happen.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Yeah, and just one last one. The thing I found fascinating, this might tie into the population who's using the service. You said the radio channels actually you continue to have to put those on the coax, it sounded like, right? And did that reduce the number of TV channels that you had?
No, I mean, in Europe we have had a war, not in US. When after the Second World War, there was a requirement in Europe that you have to have ability to have the radio outlet. I mean, if you have a building, a central antenna, you have a TV outlet and radio outlet. And that was designed that you must have that. It's a must thing in the building. So in the European outlets, there is not one connector, there's 2 connectors. The problem is that you can't buy a radio set with a connection in. There is no such. Antenna cable.
Yeah.
There is no such. Hasn't been there for 20 years. So this law is under discussion to be changed. I know in Finland, it has been a debate around this. I've been following this in a number of countries. Switzerland had the same, and the regulatory authorities, no, it should be like this, but there is no equipment. I mean, you can't even buy a broken thing, because there is no F connector on the radio. So why do we need that? I mean, that's and of course that will create in certain networks. For example, if you use the lower, I mean, like G.hn, if you use the band from 88 megahertz to 107 for radio, and if the radio must be in there, and that is, I mean, what sense that make? I don't understand that, but it's the regulators.
Okay. Well, that often is. Well, it's now 10:19, so we're 4 minutes over, so it's break time. But we're going to resume this conversation after the break with a very lively roundtable. So let's give Helga a big hand and look forward to seeing everyone.